With me to talk more about this is Rick Sharga, Executive Vice President at Online Realtors 10X. Rick, good to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
So Rick, the new housing data looking very strong, new U.S. homes at an 8-year high, pre-existing home sales at a 9-year high in June. How much of this is being driven by low interest rates and low mortgages? Is this what is behind all of this?
A lot of what's driving the increase in home sales, Michelle, is exactly that. It's historically low interest rates. It's an economy that is gradually improving. We're finally starting to see some wage growth, and we're starting to see household formation again. So the young adults are finally moving away from mom and dad. They're not playing Xbox anymore. I guess they're playing Pokemon Go, and they've left the house. And they have to find a place to live.
They're looking for Pokemons and a new house. Well, Rick, the fundamentals of the economy, are they congruent with this very strong housing market data that we're seeing?
No.
Seems like there's a disconnect there.
There is a bit of a disconnect. Housing, as you mentioned a few seconds ago, makes up a big part of the U.S. economy. And it's actually been a drag on the economy for the last few years. What's happening now is housing is actually accelerating a little bit faster than the overall economy. And it's hard to see that we'll see a sustained growth in housing unless the economy picks up some steam pretty soon.
So what impact, though, is the stronger housing market having on the economy at large?
Well, interestingly, existing home sales don't have a huge impact on the economy. But the increase we're seeing in new home sales, that's really good news from an economic standpoint, because each new home built requires an awful lot of other purchase activity by American consumers. And as you know, consumer spending makes up a huge percentage of the U.S. economy. So new home sales picking up, really good news for the economy.
So we have these low interest rates, which are leading to historically low mortgages, new home prices rising, new home sales rising. Is there concern that we could be heading towards overheating of the housing market?
Now, we've seen a couple of markets where the prices appeared to be overheating a little bit, places like San Francisco, New York, other places in California. Those prices have actually started to settle down, and in some cases have come down a little bit. So the market's behaving like it's supposed to. But the real thing that's going to keep the market from overheating is that lenders are making it incredibly difficult for the average borrower to get a loan. So when they get a loan, the payments are low and they can afford more house, but it's hard for them to get that loan in the first place.
So credit is still very tight.
Credit's still tight.
Is that one of the reasons that despite these historically low mortgage rates, home ownership in the U.S. is at a 48-year low? What's going on there? There
are actually a couple things there. One is that there's simply not a lot of inventory available for people to buy. 4.5 months of existing homes, probably about 2.5 months of new homes. So there's not much inventory. Credit still remains really, really tight, very difficult for people to get that property or that loan. And the other thing that holds people back, candidly, is that wage growth has not kept pace with home price appreciation for the last 5 or 6 years.
All things that the Fed will be taking into account in its meeting. Before we get to that, let's focus on your company, 10X. You've partnered with Shanghai-based Zhuwai.com. You're selling American properties to Chinese investors overseas. What are you seeing?
We're seeing a lot of interest among Chinese investors and really investors from the Asia-Pacific region in U.S. real estate as a good investment opportunity. They like commercial real estate, set a record last year buying the Waldorf Astoria for $2 billion. And we sold a $96 million office building online to a group funded by Chinese investors. So there's a lot of interest in both residential and commercial properties.
And what impact is that having on the housing market then?
Well, there's $105 billion of international capital that came into the residential market last year. That's still a relatively small percentage of overall sales, but it's helping to make the housing market recovery a little bit more rapid.
So, Rick, we've got the housing market recovery. We're still seeing slower wage growth, to your point. What do you think the Fed is going to do tomorrow? The general consensus is no action. Do you agree?
I think you'll see an awful lot of talking and confusing language that leads to absolute...
Which we will all dissect ad nauseum.
Yes, and there will be no change in the Fed rates tomorrow.
Do you think that the economic fundamentals are strong enough for a rate hike?
No, we've had mixed information on the jobs reports for the last few months. I think really what's going on overseas is weighing on the Fed right now.
In terms of the Brexit, in terms of China growth slowdown?
China growth slowdown, Brexit, but you also have a number of central banks that are issuing negative interest rates right now. It's hard to see the Fed raising its rates in that kind of environment.
It is hard to imagine the Fed going in the opposite direction to other central banks, but do you anticipate a rate hike at all this year, perhaps in September, December? Is that on the table?
Keep in mind, I've picked the last 3 Super Bowl winners wrong.
Oh, okay.
But I don't see a Fed rate hike this year. I think it's highly unlikely.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Rick Sharga, Executive Vice President at 10X.